In the Weeds, engineered by Fastenal, where industry meets innovation. We've got some quotes, and we want to do a deeper dive on Pete Alonso exiting the Mets and now making an impact with the Orioles from the jump. I know it's only spring training, but we'll get to all of that. Let's start with Darryl Strawberry. Here's a guy who was a Met and then eventually left to be a Dodger through free agency after the 1990 season. He was shocked and says Pete will regret leaving the Mets for the Orioles. Here's the quote from Darryl. I was really shocked that Pete would leave New York for Baltimore. Pete could have broken all the records and could have been on top of every offensive category for this organization. And then sometimes when you don't see that and realize how important that is, one day he's going to wake up just like I did and regret you didn't stick where you are at. He said also, the biggest mistake I saw was after they lost in Miami. That was the end of the season when the Mets blew their wild card lead, that Pete opted out. Darryl said, I think if he just waited and said, okay, I'll stay at that. So stay in, don't opt out of your contract, and then ask the Mets for 4 more years, something like that, they could have worked it out. He thinks also that both sides could have fought harder in the situation. Now, remember, years back, Pete did get an extension offer from the Mets. And while you're chatting, Kratz, I'll pull it up to give you the exact number. It was a nice number, but Pete ended up making more on the free agent market. The Mets in the David Stearns era was not as into Pete. I think that's pretty obvious. And Steve Cohen has spoken recently about how he is paying David Stearns a lot of money to make these types of calls. So it was under the, give me the last GM, Billy Epler era, where they threw the extension Pete's way. He said no. He did the longer deal, but really a 1-year deal, the opt-out deal, played this out, and then hops over to Baltimore. I don't think it's fair for Darryl to call out Pete during this particular offseason when the Mets weren't in sniffing distance of what Baltimore was throwing his way and valuing him at.
The key number here is 2. 2 times. The Mets really weren't that interested in locking up this player in Pete Alonso, who Darryl Strawberry is saying shouldn't have left. Not sure why he left. Don't make the same mistake that I made. Darryl Strawberry, for kids who don't know, you need to look up his numbers. And when he left New York, it was a steep drop-off. There were other things that went into that. You never know, how things are going, but you also never know as a free agent what it's going to be like somewhere else. And I'm sure Darryl left. I don't know the exact reasoning, but I'm sure he left for a big contract. And if you're not loved where you're at, where Pete was, because they went through the free agency dance twice and they weren't willing to extend him, I think Pete kind of knew going into the offseason, look, they're not that into me. I don't see why they would change their tone. I've had an incredible career. I'm the career leader in home runs here. The fans love me. They just weren't that into him. Would they have finally matched the offer? Maybe. But did he want to stay? I don't know. He seems pretty happy. Every time we've talked to Pete, every time you see something with him, and like the orange really suits him. And I think it's unfair to say, you know what? He should have just stayed. Darryl is part of the group of Mets, that old school, that old crew, that old group that won the World Series. I've never seen more of a staunch group of guys who are like, we love the Mets. You know why? Because the Mets have kept them around. They won a World Series, and the Mets have loved those guys, and they love the Mets and Mets fans. It's a reciprocal relation. It's a give and take relationship. And those guys are true blue Mets fans, and they were just ex-Mets players. I mean, you can go down the list of all the guys, and Darryl's one of them. And you never hear this from front office guys who are staunch Met fans. But these guys are not really front office, but they're not coaches. They're just strong fans of the Mets. And so good for him for saying it. Like, he wanted to keep Pete around because he's useful. The front office, who's delving out the contracts, did not. They feel like Jorge Polanco and other use of their money, and Bo Bichette is a more useful use of their money, and we'll see how it works out.
2023, the contract extension offer from the Mets was 7 years, $153 million. If you count the 7-year stretch as the prior 2 seasons for Pete, plus the 5-year deal he just signed with the Orioles, that's 7 years, $205 million. It's a big difference.
I'd love to know what
And
he
that
asked
was
for during
offered to
that.
him in 23, right? I think if he had an opportunity to get the 153 or to get, I don't want to put the same number out there because they are very far apart. But my point is, in the last 2 years, from what we know, he didn't get anything close to even 4 or 5 years on a deal offer. It was like 2, maybe 3. So they put him in a place where he had to say no.
For sure. And the part where Darryl Strawberry said, he should have accepted the opt, or not taken the opt out and then negotiated it. What in the previous offseason would have indicated to Pete, oh yeah, they'll definitely give me an extension? They could have given an extension the entire year. They could have given him the 5 years that he wanted the year before. They could have done that. And I'm not saying it's bad that Stearns doesn't want to go that long. He doesn't want those long-term deals. It's just what they want. So you're going to not be able to retain certain players. And to me, Pete Alonso was becoming a franchise type of player, not just franchise for when he's there, but franchise forever type of player. And they're willing to move on. Good for Pete for being willing to move on and going away from a place that he was comfortable in.
Yeah. Orioles value him more. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So let me explain one reason why the Orioles really love Pete Alonso right now. They feel like they made a mistake. We have many quotes coming out of Orioles camp over the last few days about how they were missing something. They brought up an exciting young core that didn't really have the Pete Alonso. And there are a number of quotes from different stories. Ken Rosenthal's story in The Athletic. There's a Baltimore Banner story. So here's Ken's story. To get the most out of their young core, the Orioles had to bring in outside veteran help. Mike Elias was quoted saying, looking back at the last couple of years, I think for our young position player group, it would have been helpful for them to have somebody accomplished from outside the organization who wasn't part of our rebuild, wasn't an Orioles draft pick, wasn't an Orioles development story. Come in and just absorb a lot of the attention on the team, speak for the team. Jordan Westberg telling the Baltimore Banner, I do think it would be good to have a personality going forward, whatever adjective you want to use, polarizing, loud, boisterous, whatever. But just something different. I think it would be beneficial. Frees people to be themselves. And then I'll finish with Tony Mansolino, who's now the bench coach for Walt Weiss over in Atlanta. He said, because he was the interim manager for the Orioles after Brandon Hyde was fired, he said, just recently, in the past 24 hours, we were asking a bunch of players in years 2, 3, and 4 to be superstars. And the reality is nobody has a bunch of players in years 2, 3, and 4 who are superstars. He's not saying you can't be a superstar earlier in your career, but to rack that many players and ask them to lead the team, you always hear this from people. Hey, if you want a total all-around team, it can't just be all of one thing. You need to have the blend. And it seemed like they were just flowing with what they tanked to create, and that was great, but they didn't add the icing on the cake. That's what they tried to do this past offseason. It seemed like they did that well. One more quote from Mansolino, by the way. He goes, being here, talking about Atlanta, coming out of this situation I just came from, and I don't say this lightly, I feel like he, as in the Braves, Alex Anthopoulos, Walt Weiss specifically, kind of rescued me in a lot of ways and got me over into this place and working under him, and I couldn't be happier. Whoa.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tony said it with his chest. I'm going to go back to the first thing before we hit that part of it. Tony Manelino talking about it. Mike Elias now, like, he must have gone back and watched some of the old FTs, the old FT episodes this is what we've talked about. Was Mike Elias the guy to be able to take this team, because there's very much parallels with the Astros, who Mike Elias worked for, and the Orioles as they came up. Like, is he able to take this team to where the Astros were going? Well, the Astros went out and made some trades for some guys that were getting to the end of expiring contracts. They weren't afraid to go to get that veteran. And now, Mike, hey, you know what? Now we got to do it. So it was tough to do. It was tough. It was tough for Mike Elias to do it, or maybe he just didn't think the team was quite ready, or maybe the ownership changed. There was a lot of things that were going on in there, but I'm glad that they've noticed it now that, hey, you know what? A veteran leader, veteran leaders, different personalities, and it's not all just the same young guys, because Mike Elias saw it as, well, Jose Altuve, Correa, and Bregman and Springer, they were all young guys that came through the organization, and we won a World Series with those guys. But they also did it with a few veteran add-ons that they had on that team. Charlie Morton started Game 7. They had Brian McCann behind the dish. I think they had McCann that year. Or did they have McCann in 22 or in 21? Anyway, whatever it is, they added on. And so that's what the teams need to do. Now, the Tony Manelino quotes that he got saved from out of there, I don't know. Rarely do you hear guys talk like this. So there had to be something that he didn't agree with. But if I'm not mistaken, he was the interim manager. And when he became the interim manager, his exact quote was, I don't know that I'm really going to change anything. When the team was struggling, if you really want to be that manager, that's your chance. That's your chance to put your stamp, your footprint on trying to change something. And so what all happened, what all went down there, I'm sure we'll hear more about it here in the next few weeks, year, while he's a Braves coach.
I think it's tough to throw a quote like that out there, and I'll read the quote again for AJ, who's back with us here the rest of the way. Tony Mansolino, interim manager for the Orioles last year, taking over after Brandon Hyde, AJ. He said, being here, coming out of this situation that I just came from, and I don't say this lightly, I feel like he kind of rescued me in a lot of ways and got me over into this place and working under him, and I couldn't be happier. That was Tony talking about Walt Weiss and the Braves rescuing him from the Orioles. To me, when you use that word, and you also said within the quote, I don't say this lightly, that means there was some shit going down. And we haven't not really heard about anything to that extent. It looked like a team that more underperformed. To me, this might have a slice of a front office disconnect. And again, I'm playing conspiracy theory game. We're a show. That's what we do. I don't think there were personality issues within the Orioles. I feel like we would have heard about that, one of us three, or there would have been something out there. Felt like a team that underperformed, that didn't stack their coaching staff with enough pitching depth, and as we've been talking about now for the last several minutes, was relying on all young core players without a Pete Alonso to take away attention and to lead the charge.
Yeah, also maybe he's a little mad he didn't get the job after he took over. I mean, it's always that. I don't know if you guys talked about that, but there's always that little tidbit you have to throw in there. And I'm not saying that was the case here at all. I don't know what these were mentioned of, but yeah, I mean, there had to be a disconnect because I'm sure he wanted to keep that big league job. So I don't know if he went to Mike Elias and the rest of the front office and said, hey, this are my thoughts, and they disagreed. But if he says he's in a better place, how about we just say, hey, I'm in a better place now. It didn't work out in Baltimore, move on. It just, when you say these things after you're not hired as the manager, or if you're let go as a player, and listen, we've all been emotional, we've all been mad, you just sound like you're a little salty, right? And I don't know. Listen, I wish him nothing but the best of the Braves, and I hope everything goes well. But I don't know. You just seem a little salty when you say these things after you let go.
What about Darryl Strawberry's quotes, which we already commented on, but we can get them from you? Your thoughts on Strawberry saying that Pete Alonso is going to regret his decision. The Mets didn't offer anything close to what the Orioles threw his way.
The Mets didn't even make him an offer, did they? I read this Twitter thread, and John Heyman fired back with, you're wrong. They never even made him an offer. So how is he going to go back? Will you just show up at camp and be like, hey, guys, I'm back. I don't want to leave here. Listen, Pete Alonso did that last year. He didn't leave. He came back on the 1-year deal with the opt-out. And what did he do? He had another great year. And what the Mets do? Not offer him another contract. So what's he supposed to do, Darryl? Sit there and just show up at Port St. Lucie and say, guys, I'm back, and you don't have to pay me. I'll just play for free, when the Orioles offered him what he offered? No, like, come on, dude. Like, it's just such a. This is just such a. I just got my number retired by the Mets. I have to do whatever they want me to say. Like, come on, know the facts before you say that. I'm sorry.
I don't even think the Mets wanted him to say that. I think Darryl doesn't really pay attention to the nuances of free agency and what is going on in the offseason. And so a reporter
Well,
puts
yeah,
a
but
microphone
he's
in
going to
his
go on
face
the
and he's
side
like,
of the
oh, yeah,
Mets.
he's going to regret that. Huh?
But he's going to go on the side of the Mets, right? Because they just retired his
No
number,
doubt.
you know. So he's going to always, he's going to look back at his choices, and I don't know what his free agency choices were when he left the Mets. Maybe they were great, obviously, but he made that decision. That's your decision, Darryl. But if Pete doesn't have the same opportunity to stay, and I don't know, maybe the Mets did offer Darryl a great contract back then. Again, I don't remember. That was a long, long time ago. But Pete had a different path because, again, the facts line up, and every reporter that you see says the Mets never made him an offer, so he can't just show up. It takes two to tango, they always say, and you need the team to want you back. The Orioles wanted Pete Alonso. Guess where he is? He's in Baltimore.
Yeah, and it seems like the early impact is strong. So, theme here, you go where you're wanted. And for the Orioles, I think a lesson was learned, and we'll see if that impact plays out for this season. The one thing that could hold them back early on this season is that they're already down a couple players. I think there's enough depth for them to still be in a good position lineup-wise. I know they'll be without Westbrook for at least a month. Sounds like Holiday will miss at least a few weeks, but there are some opportunities for other guys to step up here. And they still added, like AJ's been mentioning, about 70 home runs with Pete and Taylor Ward. I don't think offense is going to be the problem. I have more questions about the bullpen. Anyway, thoughts? Let us know. If you're watching after the fact, drop a comment. Also, shout out to Fastenal, sponsoring the segment. Industrial supplies, innovative solutions. Want to learn more? QR code is on your screen, or visit fastenal.com, Fastenal.com.